We're going to start with a Pledge of Allegiance, so if everyone would like to stand. Jeff? It's live? Oh, okay. Yes, we're going to start with a Pledge of Allegiance, so if everyone would stand, please. Welcome to our third and final election forum of this season. This is on the statewide ballot questions, question 4, medical patient tax relief, question 3, energy choice, question 2, regulate and tax marijuana, and question 1, background checks. We will be doing them in that order. I'm Maud Narole, board member with League of Women Voters, and your moderator for this evening. This forum is presented by the League of Women Voters of Northern Nevada in partnership with Sierra Nevada Forums, the American Association of University Women, AAUW, Capital Branch, and PFLAG, Carson Region Chapter. The Nevada Appeal is streaming this live on their website, nevadaappeal.com. It will also be available to watch from their site after tonight, all free access, so please tell your friends and neighbors who were not able to join us tonight that they can watch it at home. We greatly appreciate the Appeals media sponsorship. Our nonpartisan groups organize these election forums to get the facts to the public on a variety of issues to in turn help voters make informed decisions. The League is dedicated to ensuring that all eligible voters have the opportunity and the information to exercise their right to vote. Sierra Nevada Forums provide citizens with fact-based, verifiable information to assist them in making well-informed decisions on issues of importance to our community and beyond. AAUW advances equity for women and girls through advocacy, education, philanthropy, and research, and PFLAG provides support, education, and advocacy by uniting people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, LGBTQ, with families, friends, and allies. And we have a brief sentence on the next Sierra Nevada Forums, the November forum for Sierra Nevada Forums.
Good evening. The Sierra Nevada Forums takes great pride in providing seminars that share information, and on Tuesday, November 15th, you will learn by coming back here all about the volunteer organizations that are making vital impacts here in Carson City. Hope to see you there.
Thank you. A little more housekeeping. You saw as you came in the Vote 411 stickers. Vote411.org is the National League of Women Voters website with information on ballot issues and information from candidates. So you enter your address and it pops up candidates that are relevant for your location. Our other sponsors, all our sponsors have tables in the lobby. There is a donation jar. This beautiful space requires staff and cleaning and heating and general upkeep, and so they of course charge us, and so any donations will go towards that. We will at some point pass the donation jar among the audience as well. Another reminder, today is the last day to register or update your registration to vote. You can do that online until midnight, as I have been told. Please silence your cell phones or put them on something you would like to share with us. The State League of Women Voters printed these bookmarks. They were available at the front, and we're giving them to all our speakers, on civility in politics, campaign, the state. Campaign positively by focusing on sound policies, speak the truth and act with integrity, embrace civility in political discourse, Be respectful and compassionate. It goes on. The State League will be giving out Civility in Politics Awards during the upcoming legislative session. I've got a couple of more announcements, but if our speakers for this panel would come up, please, and get themselves arrayed. Volunteers will collect questions from the audience. Each panelist will answer each question. Please write questions that are addressed to all people on the panel, and write only one question per index card. If you want a question, wave your hand. If you have filled out a card, please wave the card in the air so that the wonderful people collecting questions can get back to you, can pick them up. The volunteers will give them cards to screeners to avoid duplication, and I will be reading the questions to the panel. Each speaker will have 1 minute to answer each question, 1 minute for a closing statement. Introduction times will vary, and I'll mention those as we start each panel. We want to thank all the people who gave up their Tuesday evening to come here and be with us here in the Brewery Arts Center Performance Hall, and anybody who is watching online now or later, participating in this important process in our democracy. So our first panel is on the Medical Patient Tax Relief Act, and we have an economist from the University of Nevada, Reno, Mehmet Tosun, who will do a 2-minute introduction, just informational. We have Doug Bennett speaking in favor, and for this 3-forum series we got lined up 31 speakers. We were not able to find someone to speak against this particular question, and so one of the volunteers from our organizations will read the con statement that appeared in the sample ballots that you received today, that is also on the Secretary of State's website. So we will go intro, pro, con, and then we will rotate who gets questions first.
Okay.
So,
Want me to start?
what?
I'm not answering questions.
Our con speaker is not answering questions, right? She is only reading, sorry. Thank you. So, Mehmet Tosun, if you would begin, please.
First of all, thank you, Maud, and the League of Women Voters in Northern Nevada for inviting me and my colleague, Dilek Uz, to this event. It's a pleasure to be here. So I guess I'm going to be just like, talking very broadly about, the features of like a good tax policy, and leave it to basically, others to talk about for and against, and I'll be happy to answer some questions later on. So let me start by saying that the state tax policies are usually seen as kind of like a stool with 3 legs. So normally you have 3 important features, right? So you have the sales tax being one, income tax, and the property tax. So in this state, obviously, we don't have an income tax, so it is difficult to actually maintain, a balanced stool. So what happens when you don't have these things is that, well, there's a heavy reliance on, one of the other legs. So in this case, we have, fairly heavy reliance on sales taxation, and I'll say rising reliance on sales taxation in Nevada. We're not the only one, so there's actually a trend towards more sales tax, less property tax across the United States. So we are not just like unique in terms of this. I guess like shortly I can say that, well, I can say so many things about this, but shortly I can say that this is, sales tax is a very important, tax for our state. Now, a good tax policy. So the good tax policy is supposed to be determined by a number of criteria. So we start with what we call in economics efficiency or neutrality. So that means that it is important to tax a lot of things, so put a tax on a broad base of things, as opposed to something very narrowly based, because you can raise a lot of revenue on a broad base and have a relatively lower tax rate. Equity or fairness.
And what I forgot to say is that we have a timer who has a green card for
that.
starts,
Yeah.
and a 30-second warning, and then a red card that says stop, and then she has something more annoying if people go on past that.
Okay. All right. Wow. That looks pretty serious. Okay. So then very quickly, fairness is very important. So who bears the burden of this tax is very important. Sales tax actually ranks fairly high in terms of the efficiency, because it has a relatively broad base, but that's changing. But it doesn't, do very well in terms of fairness, because it is a regressive tax. And at the same time, it is important to have enough revenue generated from it, and it is easy to administer, not a complex administrative structure. And I can say more about like how sales tax fares, but these
I
are the
think
main criteria
we're out
that
of
people use to, judge like a good tax policy from a relatively bad tax policy. I'll stop here.
Thank you. And Doug Bennett, your opening statement in favor of question 4.
Right. Question 4 is the Medical Patient Tax Relief Act. A yes vote on that means that the state would stop taxing sales tax or patients on sales tax for their home medical equipment. These are patients that primarily need things like oxygen, ventilators, CPAP machines. About 60 to 70% of our patients, if they didn't have these machines, they would go directly to the hospital, or their condition would get seriously worse. For many years, the state did not tax home medical equipment. This is because of a Supreme Court ruling in 1990 that said that oxygen administration devices, which is about 80% of what we do, were tax exempt. Now, a few years ago, the state changed their mind and decided that was an unpublished decision. It only applied to that case. Therefore, they could begin again the taxation of home medical equipment. We think this is wrong. We got 106,000 people to agree with us by signing a petition to put this on the ballot, on ballot question number 4. And the latest independent surveys show that the vast majority of people do agree that these people, these unfortunate people who have probably lost their job, cannot work, should not have to pay sales tax on their home medical equipment.
Thank you. And then we have a volunteer to read the con statement, the argument against passage that's posted on the Secretary of State's site and appears in the sample ballot.
Good evening. My name is Abby Johnson. I'm a volunteer on the board of the League of Women Voters, and it's my duty to read the arguments against passage on this question, which is entitled, Vote No on Question 4, exclamation point. Basic budget principles state that when expenses exceed revenues, debt is created. When the law requires state or local government agencies, such as schools, to be funded, the law expects a set amount of revenue to fund the agency. When a tax exemption reduces the amount of revenue expected, the agency has no choice but to request a replacement of the lost funding. To do that, the agency must depend on the governor and the legislature to include the lost funding in the budget. Sales taxes pay for a myriad of services. Nevadans rely on, including schools, police, fire departments, libraries, and parks, to name a few. Question 4 seeks to exempt durable medical equipment from sales tax. On the surface, this exemption seems like a good thing, providing tax relief to those in need. However, this exemption is really a wolf in sheep's clothing. Are you with me so far?
But speak closer to the mic.
Yeah, I'm getting feedback from it, so that's why
okay.
I wasn't, but happy to do that. Sorry? Okay. Number one, it is vaguely worded without clear definitions of what specific devices will be exempt and who will benefit, leaving such determination to the legislature. Number two, it decreases an unknown amount of revenue from an already strained budget, creating the need for higher taxes in the future. And three, it uses the law to provide special privileges to a special interest group at the expense of everyday taxpayers. Tax exemptions have consequences for the taxpayer, the same consequences as tax subsidies, tax breaks, tax abatements, and tax incentives. The Nevada Department of Taxation's 2013-14 Tax Expenditure Report states that Nevada has 243 such tax expenditures that cost taxpayers over $3.7 billion a biennium. Who is footing the bill for all these exemptions? You, the local taxpayer. You should be mindful of the most recent government giveaways, such as the approval of $1.3 billion in subsidies to Tesla, $215 million in tax incentives to Faraday, and $7.8 million in tax abatements to 6 different companies relocating to Nevada. Ask yourself, is question 4 just another giveaway? And is there any follow-up to see if promises made for these giveaways are promises kept? The question also needs to be asked, isn't this just another burden on Nevada taxpayers? If it isn't, why in 2003 and again in 2015 did our governors go after $1 billion+ in tax increases? When the wolf comes huffing and puffing at the door, reject it. Vote no on question 4. Thank you.
Thank you. So because there are only, and Abby, if you want to depart, you're welcome, or if you like being up there, you're welcome to.
Can I respond?
You had an introduction, you have a minute for conclusion. And there will be questions
Okay.
for the two of you. And because there are only 2, we're going to switch who goes first, so people will be back to back.
Okay.
So Doug Bennett, you were the second last for the intros, so you'll be first on this first question. Someone from the audience said, I thought oxygen and other medical equipment was rented. The patient does not buy them, so why tax them? Doug Bennett.
Okay. Most oxygen devices are rent to own. I would say that's 90%. So it's really treated as a purchase. Usually after 10 months, the patient owns the equipment, and therefore it's a purchase and not a rental.
Thank you. Mehmet, Tosin, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, not on
Okay,
that.
not on that one. Okay. Mehmet Tosin, you're first on this one, but it will be asked of both of you. What are some of the other things Nevada already exempts from sales tax?
So I go first, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess 2 big things is food, right? So we're one of the states that don't tax food purchase for home consumption. Food purchase in restaurants are still subject to tax, and the prescription drugs. So those are the 2 big ones that I know of.
Okay.
Which is actually pretty common, like in states. So these 2 are the popular exemptions in sales tax across the states.
Thank you. Doug Bennett?
Yes. Responding to this, the drug, oxygen is a drug, as described by the Federal Drug Administration. And the state's Department of Taxation's position is that the oxygen would be exempt as a drug, but the oxygen delivery equipment would not be. However, the reality is if you didn't have the equipment to, like an oxygen concentrator, which creates the oxygen and delivers it to the patient wouldn't get the oxygen. It's impossible to get oxygen as a drug without the oxygen administration equipment.
Okay. And Doug Bennett, you're first on this one. What is the expected financial impact to the state, schools, and local governments if this initiative passes?
Very good question. The amount of tax received from taxing home medical equipment is 0.00025 of the state's annual revenue. It's hard to get your head around that number. So I tried to think of analogies which you could visualize. If you had a bucket full of 4,000 pennies and you took 1 penny and dropped it in, that would be the amount of tax that's received by taxing home medical equipment. Also might add, during Senate Bill 334 last year, the cities of Reno and Las Vegas were asked what would be the effect of the loss of this income, this revenue from not taxing home medical equipment. And both the cities of Las Vegas and Reno said it would be immaterial.
Thank you. Mehmet Tosun?
So maybe one thing I can say is that I believe there was a Senate bill, that was proposed, before that provided more exemptions, kind of like a broader exemptions. I don't know exactly when that happened. That didn't actually go anywhere. And the Legislative Council Bureau, I think, made an estimate on it. So I don't think that there's an official estimate on this one. But there are less exemptions, so I'm thinking that the fiscal impact will be much smaller than what the previous bill had. But again, I don't have like a specific dollar figure to give you on that.
Okay, thank you. First up on the next one is Mehmet Tosun, and this will be our last question, and then we'll go to closing statements. Are scooters or wheelchairs or wheeled chairs to be exempt from the tax? What other medical device would be exempt from tax?
Okay, I'm not 100% sure what else is part of this. I guess this should be written somewhere like in the law. So I'm not sure exactly, those things are included or not. Yeah.
Doug Bennett?
Okay. Yes, wheelchairs would be exempt from this tax, and it's in the broad category of what's called durable medical equipment. The State Department of Taxation has a very good idea of what durable medical equipment is. It's really a synonym for home medical equipment. So the tax exemption would apply to, of course, oxygen equipment, wheelchairs, CPAP equipment, ventilators for, say, children with cystic fibrosis, and any manner of device that the physician had ordered and was used at home and was for therapeutic reasons.
Okay, thank you. And Doug, you are first on a 1-minute closing statement.
Okay. I'm a registered respiratory therapist and in the home medical equipment business for many years. Our patients are probably the worst off of any group of individuals of our citizens in the state. They suffer. They suffer physically. They've got emphysema. They've got any manner of diseases. They've got mobility problems. They have orthopedic problems. And it's probably, if I were to think, I can't think of a worse group of people to charge a sales tax on for medical equipment that is not optional for them. It's not like a wealthy person going out and paying sales tax on a new car. This is something they have to live. These are life-saving devices, and we do not believe they should be taxed. And I'm hoping that you agree with me.
Thank you. Mehmet Tosun.
Okay, again, without taking any sides on the issue, because I am just like talking about the general features of the sales tax and exemptions issue, I can say that, sales tax is, I told you before that it is a broad-based tax, and that's why we think of it as a good tax. It raises, a good revenue for the state governments. It's relatively stable, although it is, subject to the business cycle. But of course, it is a regressive tax. What that means is that, people at the lower end of the income distribution bears a greater burden of the tax compared to the higher income groups. So not all exemptions, but some exemptions, help with the regressivity, right? So this regressive nature is behind why there's a food exemption, for instance. So, of course, I leave it to you. You decide on this. But, again, regressivity is an important point. But at the same time, it is important to also have like a broad-based sales tax so that we have good revenue generation for our state, which we actually need because it's an important tax for Nevada.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. We will have about a 1-minute break while our medical device speakers go back down and our speakers for energy choice come up. Okay, we are ready for the question 3, which is energy choice. Because this question is a little more complicated, we have another economist from the University of Nevada, Reno. We appreciate their econ department coming down here tonight. And Dilek Uz will get 5 minutes to try to give us some information about this before we get into the pros and cons. The others will have 2-minute intros, and everybody gets 1 minute each for answering the questions and for closing. So information first, pro second, con third. Dilek Uz, if you would start, please.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me to this event. So I'm going to talk about question number 3, which is about establishment. I'm just going to read from my notes. It's about establishment of an open, competitive retail electric market that prohibits the granting of monopolies and exclusive franchises for the generation of electricity. So it's talking about monopoly here. I want to start with why we ended up with a monopoly. It made economic sense because it's actually electricity industry is a perfect textbook example of a natural monopoly, which means the reason is because we only need one set of transmission lines, only one set of distribution lines, and it makes sense to generate electricity in bulk. So all we really need is one company to handle all those things, and as we produce bulk, then the per unit cost will go down. So that was that was the economic reason why we had the monopoly in the first place. So, so there's really a deal between the monopoly and the regulator, that the monopoly gets to become a monopoly and they get to charge the ratepayers to recover their costs. But at the same time, monopoly provides, what do they provide? They provide, first of all, universal access. Not every customer is equally profitable, but yet the monopoly doesn't say no to anybody. They have to provide the service in exchange for their status. Also, they have to provide the reliable service at all times. For this, they invest in capacity in generation and transmission lines, distribution lines. So they invest in all these infrastructure, which are really, in economics lingo, they're called stranded costs. So they have to make all these costs, even before they start providing service and they start collecting the bills. They have to establish this infrastructure. They also have to make really detailed rate cases in order to substantiate their claims to increase the rates. Also, they have to comply with the state's renewable portfolio standards, so which we have really ambitious goals. I think we have to have 25% by 2025. So they have to comply with all these. So if everything is perfectly fine, then why are we discussing this? Because what happened in the past decade is the cost of generating electricity went down substantially due to the technological advancement in like the past 10, 15 years. Now, all of a sudden, it makes sense for some businesses to generate their own electricity instead of buying it from the utility. So what they want to do is they just want to say, buy to the utility, and they just want to start generating on their own so that they can save on their bills. Because remember, utility, they are charging the cost, the stranded cost that they had in the past, which were based on older, more expensive technologies that we all pay today. So currently, the large businesses, because perhaps you've heard of, they get to leave if they want to, but they have to pay an exit fee, which are like millions of dollars. Perhaps you have heard from the news. So if they want to leave, they can leave today. What this measure is about is to provide this right for everybody, for anybody who wants to leave, so that they can just leave. But really, there's nothing in this measure about how is that going to work. How are the stranded costs going to be recovered by the utilities? So there's nothing. Also, there's nothing about how the environmental impact going to work. So what is the proportion of the renewable generation if they do? So there's not much information about that. So one thing to keep in mind is a large portion of utilities costs are stranded costs. So when you when somebody leaves the utility, let's say a large customer leaves the utility, the costs don't necessarily go down proportionately. So there are still some costs to be recovered. And the utility has, the federal law and the state law gives the right to the utility to recover all those costs by charging higher rates to the remaining customers. So that's something to keep in mind. So if people start leaving, it's still a question like how those stranded costs are going to be recovered. I only have 30 seconds. So okay, like I said, the cons are, it's not really clear how those stranded costs are going to be recovered. And it's not for sure that the costs are going to go down. Of course, some competition is always is desired. Also, another thing is the utility may end up losing money, and they can. Do I have to stop? I have a couple more. I need one more minute. Okay. Is that okay? So there are some. Sorry, I have the mic now. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the pros, and then I'll wrap up in the end. So as if they get to leave, it means that some businesses and individuals, they perhaps get a chance to generate their own electricity cheaper, and so it means that there could be potential for savings. So that's a good thing. There could be some new entries to the market that could potentially create new jobs. And of course, the competition could bring the costs down for everybody. So I'm going to say a couple more things when I get to conclude at the end.
Very quickly.
So like it's, well, so the deregulation went well for Texas, but it was an utter disaster in California. So we really need to, if this passes, we really need to study all those lessons from the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Opening statement from Lucas Falletta. Did I?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
That's
okay.
right.
Super. And you two only get 2 minutes
Okay.
each.
Got it. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, for having us here. My name is Lucas Falletta. I'm with the Nevadans for Clean, Affordable Energy Choices. And, of course, we are in support of Question 3. So from our perspective, what Question 3 does is it establishes the legal right for all individuals and entities in Nevada to buy electricity from an open, well-regulated energy market. That is a fundamental shift from the system that we have today. So whereas today there's a single electricity provider throughout Nevada that is not subject to competition, that in general in this country we believe drives prices down, creates choice that gives you the benefit of new technology, new innovation, and simply gives you the best options available to you in any particular market. In today's environment in Nevada, as far as electricity is concerned, we don't do that. And we don't have the benefit of the good things that competition brings. And so, we believe that by moving away from this antiquated system, we can spur job growth in the energy sector, create an environment where we bring more renewable energy into the system, not less, where we integrate new advances in energy-related and efficiency-related technology faster, and where we also drive the price of electricity down. Without moving away from this antiquated structure, we don't believe you'll have any of those things. And we think we've seen over the last couple years significant evidence to that effect. In the last couple years, we've had a struggle with net metering that some of you may have seen. The inability of the system that we have, the legal framework, to integrate more technology into the system like net metering systems is evidence of the problem, in our opinion, where the government tells us what price we're going to pay for electricity, how much renewable energy we're going to have, and what type of technology we're going to have into the system, versus a system where people, through the aggregation of individual choice, can dictate and demand more of those things.
Thank you. And Danny Thompson?
Yes. My name is Danny Thompson. I'm a representative of a group called No Handouts to Billionaires. We are in opposition to this question. First of all, every state that has deregulated from a monopoly system, the rates have went up. Your rates right now, the residential buyer, is about 8.8 cents a kilowatt hour. If you look at the states that have deregulated, it goes as high as 19.5 cents a kilowatt hour. And Nevada is well below the national average. In fact, between 2002 and 2013, Nevada's rates reduced by 25%. In California, during that same period of time, their rates went up 35%. And in fact, in the state of Texas, there was a study done recently that showed, because Texas has a regulated side and a deregulated side. In Texas, the regulated side, the rates are cheaper than they are in the deregulated side. And so from that standpoint alone, and the proof is in the pudding. I mean, you can go to the Department of Energy's website and look up the states that have deregulated. They are all at the top of the list for the higher cost. The other thing is the method that is being used to do this. I've been in the Nevada legislature now for 37 years, both as a legislator and as a lobbyist. This issue was presented by the same people who brought you Enron. It was the same lobbyists that presented this at the Nevada legislature. They had lengthy hearings, and then they didn't even vote on it. It was such a bad idea, and they, based on what happened in California, in San Diego County, they saw an 800% increase in their rates, and the state had to go back in and make all kinds of adjustments to do that. But the way this is being done is a constitutional amendment. Now, let me tell you, if you put something in the Constitution, it is a 5-year process, take 2 votes of the people, and that's why it's on the ballot. You cannot change that. The only way you can go back and adjust that, if you vote for this thing twice, is to change the Constitution. And I would submit to you, that is just a dumb idea based on something so complicated.
Thank you. For our next question, since we're rotating who goes first, Lucas Valletta, this is yours. First, someone in our audience says, I see no reference in the Energy Choice Initiative to clean energy. Right now, Nevada has a renewable portfolio standard. Will all providers under Energy Choice be subject to the renewable portfolio standard?
The short answer to that is yes. So to the first aspect of the question, which is there's no reference to renewable energy in the language of the petition itself, that's not correct. So there is language in the petition which specifically states that nothing in the language that provides the right to buy electricity from an open electricity market undermines or should be interpreted to restrict any of Nevada's current existing renewable energy policies. Of course, the renewable portfolio standard is, most people would agree, the most significant renewable energy policy that we have. And there is nothing about opening a market and allowing other people to provide and participate in that market, provide electricity in that market, that is contrary to the renewable portfolio standard. In fact, any generally applicable renewable energy policy like the portfolio standard would be a requirement of the new market. In other words, if you want to be an independent power provider and you want to sell electricity into Nevada, you will have to comply with the renewable portfolio standard and all of the other renewable energy policies that we have. They're simply, I think it's just incorrect to interpret it any other way.
Thank you. Danny Thompson?
Yeah, so as one of the authors of the Renewable Portfolio Standard in Nevada, the reason we put that in the law was because renewables cost more than the price point that the NV Energy is paying to provide to you. But people wanted to start using renewable energy. It doesn't pay for itself, and so we put this artificial standard in there and told the regulated monopoly you have to have a certain percentage of renewals by a certain date. The power price is driven by the price point of fuel, and so if you have all these other people coming in here, the portfolio standard will go out the window. It will be unenforceable. You will be buying from Ohio Power. They will be selling you power at the lowest price point, which is, right now today, natural gas or coal. You won't be able to enforce, you can enforce it on one company now. That literally every company in America will be here knocking on your doors saying, hey, have I got a deal for you? And if you're a large company that's sophisticated and have people that go on the market and say, oh, we can get it at this price point, it's one thing. But if you're, Joe Sixpack sitting at home watching TV, you're not that sophisticated, and there's going to be a lot of fraudulent activity going on. Thank
you. Guz, did you have?
Well, I personally didn't see anything for or against or anything about the renewable. So this policy, this rule is not really about renewables at all. It's about the free market. Or trying to make the market more free. So I didn't really see anything for or against the renewable. So I don't think this is going to specifically affect the renewable portfolio.
Okay, thank you. For the next question, Danny Thompson, you are up first.
Okay.
Who is funding the push to pass this measure, and what is their financial interest in getting it passed? Who is funding the opposition, and what is their financial interest?
The money that's been donated in the proponent side is Sheldon Adelson, a billionaire in Las Vegas that owns multiple casinos, MGM Resorts, who is the largest largest casino operative in the state, and Switch. they want to leave the system, and you talked about the stranded costs. They don't want to pay the stranded costs of the system. They just want to leave. A bill passed 2 sessions ago, AB 661, that allowed people to leave, but they have to pay the stranded cost, which in effect you and I own because it's a monopoly company. So if you build a hotel, you just don't go in there and turn the lights on 4,000 rooms. Massive infrastructure has to be put in place that's very expensive, and to the tune of millions of dollars. They want to leave, but they don't want to pay the stranded costs. And if you leave and don't pay those costs, everyone else that's in the system is going to have to pay that company, because NV Energy will not go away. There'll be a wires company, and they will own all of that infrastructure, and someone has to pay them for it. The law says currently that if you use more than 1 megawatt, you can leave the system today, but you have to pay the stranded cost. So a laundromat could leave if they wanted to.
Thank you. De La Gouze?
I don't think it's right for me to comment on that as the university employee.
Okay. Lucas Valletta?
Sure, thank you. I think the answer to this question goes sort of back to the issue of renewable energy. First of all, nobody supporting this measure is trying to avoid paying stranded costs or leave ratepayers holding the bag for significant costs of underlying assets and infrastructure that were built to service them. MGM is one of the companies supporting this measure, along with a number of other companies, including Tesla, Switch, Sands, as Mr. Thompson referred to, a number of other businesses, Valley Electric Cooperative Association, some small businesses in Nevada, as well as 155,000 everyday ordinary Nevadans who signed the petition to get it on the ballot. MGM, as one of the leading companies in Nevada, the state's largest employer, they're supporting this, and in addition to that fact, they are leaving NV Energy's system, and they are paying for all those so-called stranded assets, despite the fact that opening this market is a possibility. And that's because having access to affordable, renewable energy is important to companies like MGM and these others from a social responsibility perspective. 60% of Fortune 500 companies have a greenhouse gas emission and renewable energy goal.
Thank you.
Could I continue, please? Because this is an important point. 43% of Fortune 100 companies have the same goal. To paint all the people who are supporting this as dirty, rotten billionaires who are trying to leave everybody else holding the bag is simply not right. These are companies who want to have access to more renewable energy to drive the development of renewable energy for other people as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And we are now at closing statements. De La Gouze, you're first.
Okay. So what I want to finally say is it's really desirable to have competition in general. It's a good thing for the society. It reduces cost, it spurs innovation. But we really need to be careful. So I want to say, voter beware, because there has been bad examples and good examples in the past. And so there are going to be probably thousands of hours that are going to go into formulating the law and establishing the market. And and of course we're not going to. We don't know what's going to happen, how the people. So also the turnout is not really guaranteed. Because there's a significant amount of inertia. Not everybody is going to switch, and those who do remain may end up being stuck with higher costs. But of course, it's hard to tell today. So, yeah.
Thank you. Lucas?
Sure, thank
now
you.
you have a minute for closing.
1 minute, okay. I just want to reiterate our main objectives here in supporting question 3. Question 3 is meant to drive the creation of jobs, lower the price of electricity for everyone, and create more renewable energy in the system. In Nevada, we create the fewest number of jobs per capita in the West in the energy sector, and we also produce fewer jobs in energy than any state of our size. We can't do better in that respect unless we unlock the ability of private investment to drive job growth in this sector, in particular on the renewable energy side. In states that have opened their markets, there are 14 others, we see that happening. After 10 years of an open market in Texas, they created 10,000 wind jobs. Those jobs were in the renewable sector, obviously, and as a result, they went from 2.6 million megawatt hours of wind generation to 26 million megawatt hours. That would not have happened in the traditional monopoly setting. We're also talking about controlling the price of electricity for everyone. So what Mr. Thompson said earlier is just not correct. From 1997 to 2014, open market states constrain the price increases in electricity that all states experience because of inflation far better. They only rose 40%, whereas they rose 60% in the other states. In states
Thank
that
you.
implemented it well, there were, like, for example, in Illinois, there was $41 billion in savings. Pennsylvania saved $22 billion.
Thank you.
This policy can be successful and is successful if implemented correctly, which is why the legislature has until 2023 to develop the implementation rules that will guide the market in the future.
Thank you. And Danny Thompson.
Thank you. Don't take my word for it. Go home, look up on the Department of Energy website, and look up the rates that you pay here and the rates that are paid in the states that have deregulated, and you will see that you are well below the national average and that they are at the top of the national average, and not by small numbers, by significant numbers. The reality is, this is just a dumb idea. It's an idea that failed, or the Nevada legislature would have passed it. They had hearings for a month on this issue. They didn't even vote on it, like 3 sessions ago. And so there was a reason they did that, because they knew they didn't want to have to answer to all of you when your rates went up. And this will negatively impact renewables. There's no question. NV Energy currently right now has 1,000 megawatts of solar in the desert in El Dorado Valley that you're getting right now today. And so they've done a good job for you. It's a regulated company. The PUC has kept the costs down. And you have to have the cost down, and you have to have a reliable provider. And that's the other thing that gets thrown out the window with this. If you don't have regulation on these companies, the reliability of NV Energy is pretty good. I know I was born in Las Vegas, and I remember every time it stormed, the power went off, and it'd be off for a day or two. Today, that doesn't happen anymore. You're going to go back to those days where you are going to be having the wires paid to Nevada Power, because they'll still be here, and then you're going to be buying your energy from somewhere in Ohio. That alone is going to drive the cost up. Don't take my word for it. Go home and look it up for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you to all three of you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming. Two speakers for question 2, regulate and tax marijuana. So we are almost set for question 2, regulate and tax marijuana. And since we've been doing pro first and con second, Holly Welburn will do the first intro. We're doing 5-minute intros for each speaker on this question, and then again, 1-minute answers to the questions and 1-minute closings. So Holly Welburn.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Holly Welborn, and I'm the Policy Director for the ACLU of Nevada. I am very pleased to be here tonight. I wanted to say thank you to the League of Women Voters and Sierra Nevada Forum for inviting me to participate this evening. I am thrilled to announce that just last week, the ACLU of Nevada formally endorsed Question 2. It is critical that this measure passes. Regulating marijuana, like alcohol, will expand the freedoms of adults to make their own entertainment and consumption choices. Marijuana prohibition is simply a failed policy. It creates an unequal system resulting in people of color being incarcerated at 4 times the rate of white people committing the same crimes. Nevada should support the expansion of our freedoms and end the discriminatory application of our drug laws. 1950s justifications for criminalizing marijuana have been largely debunked. Marijuana is objectively far less harmful than alcohol. It is less addictive, less toxic, and less likely to be associated with violent behavior. Furthermore, law enforcement wastes valuable resources enforcing these laws. We've taken this widely used substance and allowed its production and sale to be controlled by drug cartels, thus steering law enforcement away from more serious violent criminal activity. Shifting production and sale of marijuana to a highly regulated market where products are labeled and tested and sales take place in a safe business is just simply sound and decent policy. But it doesn't only have positive impacts on the criminal justice system, there are also substantial economic benefits if we choose to vote yes on question 2 in November. The cost of regulating marijuana will be covered by a 15% excise tax on wholesale marijuana, and an excess of those funds, up to $20 million, will go toward K-12 education. The cannabis industry will create about 3,000 new jobs, 3,300 new jobs in Nevada. If we look at Colorado, we can see many of the positive benefits that they are seeing as a result of this new booming industry. They've increased 29,000 new jobs in that economy. They were rated the number 3 best economy in the nation in 2015. Shifting marijuana sales to state-licensed businesses that are required to check for identification will make it more difficult for teens to acquire marijuana. Current medical establishments will be the first establishments that receive retail licenses. Therefore, this industry will start off in good hands with experienced people that know about these products, what they contain, what levels of THC are contained in those products, and it will be an industry that we can trust. And finally, the initiative has sensible restrictions on marijuana. It leaves in place Nevada laws related to driving under the influence, and it prohibits the use of marijuana in public. And it also allows employers to maintain policies restricting the use of marijuana by employees. Thank you again.
Thank you. Jim Hartman.
Yes, my name is Jim Hartman, and I am the volunteer president of Nevadans for Responsible Drug Policy. And tonight we're not going to be talking about the criminal justice system and decriminalizing marijuana, because that's not what's at issue here. We're not going to be talking about medical marijuana, because that is not at issue here. We are going to be talking about commercialized recreational marijuana. And before we start talking about that subject, I think looking out at the audience here, I see people that probably grew up in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and I think we need to clarify exactly what is at issue. Marijuana is dramatically different. The industry is dramatically different than that which we knew about in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Pot potency is 10 times in the natural flower, 10 times what it was in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And there's a huge industry of edibles. In Colorado, 45 to 50% of the sales are of edible products that are aimed at and attractive to kids. Space cookies and gummy bears and Chiba Chews and caramel corn and grown-up granola. That is the market. It has changed dramatically, and we need to know that. The other point, and we're going to get into more of the details here, but what we have on the ballot, which the proponents don't like to talk too much about, is a 13-page initiative that was drafted by the marijuana industry. It is by them, for them, benefiting them. It's the same thing what we'll be voting on is this 13-page initiative drafted by them, written by them, and we should be as skeptical of that initiative as we would be if we were voting on something to do with alcohol, knowing that the Jim Beam Company had written the initiative, or as skeptical of a smoking initiative that was authored by the Philip Morris Company. They're exactly the same thing. And as we go through this initiative, which, as I say, the other side doesn't really like to talk too much about, you will see exactly how this is drafted for their benefit, to their benefit, and that will be abundantly clear here. The discussion of Colorado, I hope we get an opportunity to talk about Colorado. Because in Colorado right now, if you ask the officialdom of the state as to whether they would see Nevada as a good place for legalization to happen, the governor of the state has indicated that he wouldn't recommend this to Nevada. The attorney general of the state wouldn't recommend this to Nevada. The district attorney of Denver wouldn't recommend this to Nevada. The mayor of Colorado Springs wouldn't recommend this to Nevada. The former mayor of Denver said it's a disaster in his state. He wouldn't recommend it to Nevada. And the former governor of the state, a Republican former governor, says and this is across the board, Republicans and Democrats in Colorado, if they are given an opportunity to tell us what they think about their program in the state of Colorado, they would tell us not to vote in favor of this initiative that is on the ballot. Other point is this initiative can't be changed. If it's passed, it cannot be changed for 3 years. That's the nature of this. This is a moneyed group of people that have come to Nevada. They think they can pass this easily. It would never have passed and didn't pass the legislature because it's a self-serving, one-sided initiative that benefits only the big marijuana interests all across the country.
Thank you. So because there are only two of you and we're rotating who goes first, whoever went last is first up on the next question. So Jim Hartman, you're first up on this. If question 2 passes, marijuana will legally be in many homes where children live. Children access their parents' alcohol, their parents' tobacco. How about their parents' recreational marijuana, including edibles? Would that pose a problem? And 1 minute for each of you.
Well, absolutely it would. And it has been a problem across the country. And it's one of the reasons why, across the board, the political leadership of this state has indicated its opposition to this. Law enforcement is opposed to this initiative. They've identified that as a problem. And that is the Chiefs and Sheriffs Association, the DAs, the state's medical society, the Nevada State Medical Association is opposed to this. The gaming industry is opposed to this. The NRA, the Nevada Resort Association. Governor Sandoval is opposed to this. And Senator Reed has said he's very, very dubious and concerned and indicated that he would vote against Measure 2 or Question 2 on the ballot. The 2 senatorial candidates, one a Republican, one a Democrat, Masto and Hecht have both indicated their opposition to this being passed in Nevada. So it's across the board. The two leading newspapers in the state, the Las Vegas Review-Journal and the Reno Gazette-Journal, have both editorialized
Thank you.
opposed to this measure.
Thank you. Holly Wilburn?
Yes, so the question was about whether or not children would be able to access edibles and marijuana products that parents bring into the home. And of course, the answer to that is yes. But there are ways that we can limit children's access to these products. Edibles are problematic. The health and safety of our children is of critical importance, and we certainly I wouldn't want my nieces and nephews to ingest a product that's intended for adult consumption. But the state of Colorado has responded to accidental ingestion of marijuana products by passing follow-up legislation that requires that, they not be in the shape of gummy bears or people or any other kind of, attractive packaging to children. And it's been quite successful. Another thing that we have to take into consideration is education. The way that we stop children from engaging in using a product that is used for adults is through public education. We could just look at the numbers with tobacco and the way that regulation has led to a decrease in the use of tobacco products.
Thank you. So, Holly Wilburn, you are first up on this next question. How much money is estimated to be raised for education?
Right now, it's looking after the cost of regulation is covered that it could be up to $20 million that is invested in K through 12 education in the state. That we're predicting that it could be a $1 billion business in the state of Nevada. If we look at Colorado, Colorado has earned about $135 million since they've legalized marijuana in that state, and education is receiving money from those tax benefits that the state is receiving. We are confident that would happen here. We issued a report, an economic analysis report that was through the Economic and Fiscal Benefits Analysis through the Marijuana Policy Project and RCG Economics in Las Vegas. We're anticipating $393 million in annual sales of adult use marijuana, which could increase to $485 million by 2024. There'll be $1.1 billion in overall economic activity in the state related to adult use medical marijuana market. Not to mention the $60 million in excise sales tax revenue, including approximately $20 million per year for schools. And then there's also the results of revenue from ancillary businesses and the tourism industry. We do believe.
You.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Hartman.
Yeah, the proponents claim they think they can raise $20 million here. And I went to law school, and there was a phrase called de minimis non curat lex. It's so small as to be insignificant. The reality is, if you factor in all of the costs of enforcement, administration, drug treatment, public health, no money will be raised. Think about this. On the ballot in Washoe County, they're proposing $800 million for the schools over 10 years. $20 million, even at the best case here, wouldn't buy a part of a middle school. It's ridiculous. The money in Colorado, how much money do you think the Denver Unified School District gets from marijuana money? Well, the answer is zero. And the neighboring school district, the Cherry Creek School District, gets zero. The amount of money raised in Colorado by the recreational marijuana amounts to 0.13% of the state budget. De minimis non curat lex.
1 minute goes by pretty quick.
1 minute. We get more questions in this way. Jim Hartman, you're first up on this. Will the measure prohibit people from growing their own marijuana?
Well, this is classic. This is where I say this thing is so incredibly self-serving. Section 6 of the initiative says you can possess 1 ounce, 1/8 of an ounce of concentrate, and you can grow 6 plants as long as they're locked away and can't be accessed by kids or seen. That sounds pretty, straightforward. Go back to section 14 of the initiative, and what does it say? Well, you really can't grow your own marijuana if you're within 25 miles of a retail store. And they are going to propose, in the initiative, it says there'll be 80 stores in Clark, 20 in Washoe, 4 in Carson, 2 in the rurals. Start drawing 25-mile radii around those locations, and you'll discover that 95 to 98% of Nevadans will be locked out of this halo. They will not be able to grow marijuana. And as I describe this, this is bait and switch. They bait in 6 and they switch in 14.
So the answer is yes, you will be able to grow your own marijuana, as is stated in Section 6. Right now, there are limited dispensaries. So once this goes into effect, the medical marijuana dispensaries will be the first to get licenses to start practicing, to start opening retail establishments in the state. There are still individuals that are able to grow in their homes. There's also provisions under medical marijuana law that provide that certain individuals can continue to grow cannabis in their homes, and that 25-mile radius does not apply. It's certainly not a bait and switch, because this is just a way to regulate the market and to ensure that people are, purchasing the product that's out in the consumer economy. So that's my answer. Thank you.
The next question, Holly Welburn, you're up first. How much effort will law enforcement have to spend to enforce marijuana laws, and how will DUI be tested and enforced?
Okay. I think the question, there's 2 parts to that question. So the first part, this is going to decriminalize the use of marijuana. So we're not going to have to worry about individuals being ticketed. I mentioned before that there's a disparate impact on the African American community when it comes to the enforcement of drug policies. I think we're talking about the implementation of the law and how that affects driving under the influence. So this campaign is in no way advocating that we repeal any kind of DUI law. This campaign is advocating for a retail market for medical marijuana. We are not advocating against, those penalties. In fact, Nevada has some of the harshest penalties for driving under the influence in the state. There are blood testing techniques that officers use and utilize currently. There really aren't any positive statistics, set in stone statistics that show that there are increases in the rates of people driving while under the influence. There might be increases in people being tested for marijuana, but it isn't an increase in people actually driving under the influence.
Jim Hartman?
Let's make something very, very clear. Alcohol can be tested by police, law enforcement with a breathalyzer. There's no such device that can test for marijuana currently. So we are at sea as to how to treat marijuana drivers and people that are pulled over. Do you have a per se rule, or do you with a blood test, which would be inaccurate in many respects? The reality is the law enforcement in the state, one of the reasons they gave for opposing this is this very issue. Very difficult to detect, very difficult to convict people on marijuana intoxication. And here's some facts. In Colorado, there's been a 48% increase in marijuana-related traffic deaths over the last 3 years. Same results in the state of Colorado. AAA Foundation showed a 100% increase in marijuana-related incidents in the state of Washington. Same is happening in the state of Oregon.
Actually, that goes right into the next question. We have heard some about the effects of legalized recreational marijuana in Colorado, both here and Sierra Nevada Forums did an entire evening on it. What are the effects of recreational marijuana in Oregon and the state of Washington? Mr. Hartman first.
Well, I think right now it's very early in the game to know. Oregon is very early in the process. Washington is also relatively early in the process. We have the most information on the state of Colorado at this point, and it's not encouraging. Marijuana use, 20% increase in 2 years. That would be 12 to 17-year-olds. They've gone from 14th in the country in 2005 and 6 up to number 1. Same is true of college-age marijuana use. 18 to 26-year-olds, they were number 8 in the country in 2005. 2006, they're now number 1. Same is true of adult use. And the fact of the matter is, in Colorado, we're looking at the leaders, if you will, in opioids, alcohol, cocaine, and marijuana.
So the AAA study that was just referenced, in that study, it actually indicates that the correlation between individuals that were cited having marijuana in their system, they were actually initially pulled over for driving under the influence of alcohol. Then they had subsequent drug tests which found marijuana in their systems. That really, it's more of a correlation between the fact that, marijuana is legalized so more people are using it, but there isn't any evidence that they were actually under the influence of marijuana alone that had led to those fatalities. Second, when we're talking about, the increase in teen rates and of young people using marijuana at a higher rate since the Colorado law went into effect, the opposition is really looking at studies of, small sectors of people, but the larger studies that surveyed more teens actually revealed that the rate of use is flat, and actually between 2011 and 2015, the rates of teen use actually fell.
So, Holly Welborn, you're first on the next question. Given that federal restrictions keep commercial marijuana money out of the federal banking system, is there a danger of attracting criminals to cash held at retail marijuana stores?
The cash problem is an issue, and until we reschedule marijuana at the federal level and create a legitimate business and decriminalize its use at the federal level, the cash handling system is going to be problematic. But there are different funds that have been established for medical dispensaries, and there isn't any evidence of any kind of criminal activity or money laundering or whatever practice going on right now in the state of Nevada. So, once we can work on this at the national level and we can, go this next step, this is a very important first step in looking at our drug policy, and the states are sending a clear message to the federal government that there needs to be a change.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is we have this dichotomy in Colorado, and it would be in the state of Nevada, of the federal law is very, very clear. Marijuana is illegal. It is still a Schedule I drug. It went through a 2-year process of review, and the DEA, the Obama administration's DEA, confirmed and maintained marijuana as a Schedule I drug. And that means in Colorado, at least 70% of the banking system is unavailable to marijuana businesses. And the reason, actually, that there's a concern in the Nevada Resort Association, our gaming industry, is they will need to know sources of income of people that are coming in and gambling in their institutions. They need to file forms, and there needs to be a bright line. They need to know where their customers are getting money. And the reality is that causes them great worry and great concern, and that is why they are opposed to question 2.
So, Jim Hartman, you're first up on this next question. Since medical marijuana is still illegal at the federal level, why don't we wait, especially to have more information from the states of Colorado, Washington, and Oregon regarding the impacts in those states?
That would be exactly my position in all of this. And my position would be, I would follow what Governor Hickenlooper says. Wait a year or two to see how this all shakes out. The mayor of Colorado Springs says, wait 5 years to see how this works in Colorado. What is the rush to leap off the cliff and legalize this? The state of Massachusetts has this on the ballot. They had a state Senate committee go to Colorado. They interviewed 75 Colorado people. They came back and said unanimously, let's wait and watch what goes on. We don't know what's going to happen at the federal level. We don't know where our own medical marijuana system is going to be. We are in the very early stages of our own medical marijuana system. Let's see how that works out here, what problems there are in Nevada. There is no good reason to leap off the cliff, particularly if that means enacting an initiative that was drafted for and by the marijuana industry.
And
time-
this is our last question, and then we'll go to closings.
Thank you. The time is now. The time is now to show the rest of the country that we are ready to move forward with drug policy, to make serious changes with drug policy. Nevada can lead that charge. And if we don't do it, our neighbors to the west are going to do it. And we're going to lose out on that revenue that, we're going to lose out on that revenue that will be filtered over to the state of California, because in their polls, they will pass recreational use this election cycle. So instead of sending that revenue over to California and diverting tourist dollars over to California, when we can invest here and we can look at the market here and look at how that market applies to Nevada. There are several things in Nevada that are legal in this state that have been successful businesses and that draw tourists here every year, and that's what's attractive to the state. Nevada is poised to be a leader in the marijuana industry, and we should go down that path.
Thank you. And closing statements, Holly Welborn, a minute each. Holly, you go first.
Thank you again for having me here tonight. As I was saying before, the time is now to move forward. We are incarcerating people for simple drug charges at unprecedented rates. There has been a movement in this country to stop this practice. It started here in Nevada first with legalizing medical marijuana, moving into decriminalizing possession of small amounts of marijuana, and now it's the time to realize that this is something that adults consume on a regular basis, and it is time to reap the tax benefits of that here in our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Hartman.
Yeah, let's start with these thousands of people that are incarcerated. Nice argument in the 1970s, nice argument maybe up through the early 1980s. How many people do you think are incarcerated in the state of California for simple possession of marijuana? The answer, according to the Department of Corrections, is 0. And let's take Nevada. There are 14,200 inmates in Nevada jails. The analysis is that
13,961. I'm sorry.
Yeah. 0.7% are in for possession. 0.7% times 14,200 would be 90 people are in jail for simple possession. The reality is those are bogus, interesting things to rev people up politically, but they don't have any real basis in fact. Join with Governor Sandoval. Join with the Lieutenant Governor, the Attorney General of this state, Republicans and Democrats, former Governor Bryan, a Democrat, former Governor List, a Republican, the 2 senatorial candidates, one a Republican, one a Democrat. Join with chambers of commerce across this state. Join with the Sheriff's Association and the district attorneys. And join with the Nevada Medical Association. And join with the community, one Nevada community, saying no to question 2.
Thank you both. And last but not least, we have question 1 on background checks. We have 2 speakers for that. If they would come down, please.
It was well attended. It was good.
Okay, I think we're ready for our last panel. This is question 1 on background checks, and each panelist has 4 minutes for an introduction. And then, as before, there will be 1 minute for each of them to answer each question and 1 minute closings. So we've been doing pro and then con. So Dan Reed, you're with the opposition. I'll get this. It is the last one of 3. Of 3 long nights. So Jennifer Crow, if you would go first, please.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for the sponsors of this event tonight, for everybody coming out to listen and learn, and for everybody watching at home as well. My name's Jennifer Crow. I'm the Communications Director for the Vote Yes on One campaign to pass question 1, the background check initiative. I think it's really important that we all have the ability to separate the facts from the fiction when casting our vote on critical issues facing our state. And question 1 is one of those critical issues. Currently, under our laws, if you go to buy a gun at your local dealer, whether it's your neighborhood store or a big box store, you go through a background check, and that's been the law for quite some time. However, there's this loophole in the law that allows for private sales through online marketplaces and at gun shows without background checks. Question 1 simply closes that loophole to require background checks on all gun sales with some reasonable exceptions. This is really a common sense measure that levels the playing field so that unlicensed sellers conduct background checks the same way that licensed gun dealers already do. It's really important in this debate to know that background checks have been the law since 1998. And in that time, they've blocked more than 2 million gun sales to felons, fugitives, domestic abusers, and other dangerous people who, under our current laws, are prohibited from having guns. And really, this is the single most effective tool that we have to enforce those laws to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. In fact, right here in Nevada, between 2012 and 2014, more than 5,000 gun sales to these dangerous prohibited purchasers, they're called felons, fugitives, domestic abusers, were blocked right here in Nevada by background checks at licensed gun dealers. So clearly we know that this system works. Unfortunately, thousands of guns are exchanged in Nevada every year in these unlicensed private sales where background checks are not required. And that simply just makes it far too easy for criminals to get around the background check requirements and easily get a gun. It happens all the time. They don't need to go find a corrupt seller in a dark alley to get a gun. They can really just go online, connect with a stranger, meet up at the parking lot down the street, and get a gun because no background checks are required. And we think that's dangerous, and we think we can do more to make it harder for criminals to get guns by closing this loophole. And we know it works. In states with similar laws, they see significant reductions in gun violence. 48% fewer law enforcement officers shot and killed in the line of duty, 46% fewer women shot and killed by their intimate partners, and a 48% reduction in gun trafficking in those cities. So we know that passing question 1 will help reduce gun violence and that will save lives. I've told you a little bit about what question 1 is, and now I'd like to tell you what it is not. Question 1 is not a gun registry. That's prohibited under the federal law, and nothing in the ballot measure would change that. Question 1 does not change who can own a gun or how many guns anybody can buy. All it does is close the loophole to require background checks. Question 1 does not make criminals of law-abiding gun owners. There are reasonable exceptions in the law for family transfers and sharing guns while shooting or hunting. You know, question 1 is also not an infringement on our rights. I've lived in Nevada a really long time, and I believe in the Second Amendment, but I also believe that with that fundamental right comes a real responsibility to do all that we can to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people, and that's what question 1 does. And it's why we have widespread support. Thank you.
Yes. Hey, can everyone hear me? This microphone's a little bit low here. Are we good? All right. I'll try and talk loud. First off, thank you to the Nevada League of Women Voters for allowing us the opportunity to come and discuss this important issue. I'm Dan Reed. I'm with NRA Nevadans for Freedom, and we're in opposition to question 1. And we're asking you to vote no on question 1, to stand with our governor, to stand with our Attorney General, Adam Laxalt, and to stand with law enforcement across the state. 16 out of 17 elected sheriffs, including the sheriff here in Carson City, are in opposition to this question because they know it's not going to make Nevada safer. And the one sheriff that hasn't taken, or that is not in opposition, has not taken a position. He's remained neutral, and there's been concerns on this. And that's because at the end of the day, this proposal was bought and paid for by Michael Bloomberg to be on this ballot. It's ineffective, it's completely unenforceable, and it could cause problems for law-abiding citizens and have devastating impacts without affecting criminals. We've consistently seen studies that show that criminals don't operate through the normal channels. They don't go to gun stores. They don't go to gun shows. They're getting firearms through theft, through the black market, or they're using straw purchasers who actively defeat the background check system. Statistics have shown that there is no impact on states that have passed expanded background checks. It's just not happening. And if you look at Washington State, they passed this through initiative in 2014. And just yesterday in the news, they announced their first prosecution under that. One prosecution over the course of 2 years. And if you look at the initial facts that are coming out on that, there's so many other laws that are violated, and it was after the fact. It was not preventing anything. Now, there are some exceptions to this, but the exceptions are confusing and misleading, and it just goes to the nature of the entire initiative. We're not talking about just sales here. We're talking about all transfers. Anytime you relinquish possession of a firearm, you may be subject to going to a dealer and running a check. And transfer is the key word here, but it's not defined anywhere in the initiative. The very basis of this is not defined. And so you have to look at these exceptions, and you see various exceptions that are more confusing, and there's more unknowns and non-definitions that could entrap an otherwise law-abiding citizen. Now we hear, and before we get back to those exceptions, we hear loophole, loophole, loophole. But currently, under Nevada law, you have the option to run a voluntary background check through a private sale. Currently, this was something that the legislature contemplated. It wasn't something that they overlooked. It wasn't an accident that they didn't include these private transactions. This was something that was contemplated, and they said, if you would like to run a background check on someone, you have that option now. And in 2015, these used to cost $25, and now they are free. So with the exceptions, you know, we hear about the hunting exception. But if you look at it, you can only possess the firearm in all areas where it's legal to hunt, making it impossible to ever get to your hunting destination. And where do Nevadans, where do we recreate? BLM land. You can't loan a firearm to your friend to go on BLM land. And if you look at the exceptions, you can loan a firearm to your uncle or sell a firearm to your uncle, but not your cousin. How does that make any sense? And even more so, look at our CCW holders, law-abiding citizens. They are what's known as Brady exempt. When they go to buy a gun from a gun dealer, they are not required to get a background check because they've already had the check that's been approved through the Department of Public Safety. They're not exempt under this. So if they go to buy a gun from a retailer, they don't have a background check, but to borrow one, they have to go and get the check and go through all the paperwork. Thank you.
Next question, and since we're rotating, whoever's last up is
Sure.
first up next. So, Dan Reed, this is from a member of the audience, all my gun owner friends state that the government wants to take their guns away. They say this question is the first step. Question, is there anything in this initiative that would take away legally owned guns?
To your question, no, it's not taking away legally owned guns. I think a lot of the concerns there is looking at how the current voluntary system is done, and people have concerns with how this could be turned into a registry. And currently, if you do the voluntary check, you are contacting the Department of Public Safety and filling out a form that just has information on the person who's attempting to acquire. However, under this initiative, you're required to go to a dealer, which requires a lot of paperwork, et cetera, and so that's where the concern comes from.
I know I'm asking the question, but verbally asking the question, but it's our wonderful audience out there that is doing the listening.
I was just avoiding the lights.
Oh, no. Sorry. Jennifer Crow.
Sure. I'd like to talk a little bit about the voluntary system that Dan mentions. It is available if you want to sell a gun to somebody and you want to make sure that that person is allowed under our current laws to have it. You can do a voluntary background check. It requires you to go online, download a form, fill it out in blue ink, get it notarized, mail it to Carson City, and they will respond and send you a reply within 5 business days. That's neither fast or efficient of a system. What we're proposing is the buyer and seller meeting at a licensed gun dealer, and most Nevadans, even in the most rural parts of our state, live within 10 miles of a licensed gun dealer, to conduct a background check, something that they do all the time. Most are completed within just a few minutes, so as opposed to waiting up to a week or more to get an answer, you can get an answer immediately. So we think that this is just a much more efficient and effective way, again, to enforce the laws that we already have.
Thank you. And Jennifer Crow, you are up next on this question. Will the state database or the federal database be used for background checks?
Sure, good question. The way that the ballot measure is written, it will be a check conducted through the FBI, the NICS system. A very well-tested, well-used, effective system that's been serving more than half of the states since background checks became the law in 1998. State sales do go through a point of contact system in our state, but these would go through the federal system, and that's because that system is free as well.
Thank you. Dan Reed.
Sure, yes. To look at some of the history behind this, question 1 was actually a bill in 2013. And the original bill had it going to the Department of Public Safety, like our dealers use now, the point of contact. And the reason that that method was abandoned is because it was considered a tax. And so to avoid the tax implications, it switched to the NICS system. So now what you'll have is a split system. And so a dealer selling a firearm out of their own inventory is going to be required to contact the Department of Public Safety and pay $25 for that background check, versus the person who's coming in to do a private sale, private transfer, that's going directly to NICS. And so you're going to have this split system. And if you look at the way the initiative is written, it says the dealer may charge a fee, obviously also to most likely avoid tax implications. And so we don't know what those fees are going to be. We've seen estimates somewhere around $50. And let's remember, if you're loaning a firearm to someone, you do the background check and the paperwork to loan them the firearm, and then once you're finished, you're going to have to go back and repeat that process.
Dan Reed, you're up next, first on this. Since legal gun sales go through background checks, why not level the playing field by requiring background checks for all sales?
Well, when you look at this, it's like most things in our country. When it comes to commercial sales or commercial activities, we regulate them much more heavily than non-sales. And if you look at this, the incidental transfers, I mean, we're talking not just sales, but we're talking loans, leases, we're talking Let's say I'm stationed at one of our many military bases here in Nevada, and I live with my fiance and I'm getting deployed. Under this, it makes me a criminal to store my firearm with my fiance, or with my roommate, or with my girlfriend, or life partner, whoever it is. This is so much more expansive than just sales. It's, like I said, anytime you're relinquishing possession of your firearm, unless it meets one of those exemptions to the T.
Thank you. Jennifer Crow.
Sure. I'd just like to make one comment on the previous question. Dan mentioned that there would be a split system. That's not unusual. There are several states that have a split system, and it works just fine for them. So I just wanted to point that out. I agree, obviously, with the question's premise, but one thing that I would like to mention is that something that's unusual or different now than when the background check law was first passed in 1998, or first implemented in 1998, is this online marketplace. You know, then you didn't go online to buy anything from, you know, bullets to diapers, and now you can. And we know that just here in Nevada, on a handful of sites, more than 30,000 gun ads are placed every year just by Nevadans. And most of those are private sales that don't require background checks. So online marketplaces have really become the new black market. That's what we hear from the law enforcement organizations that support what we're doing, including several groups that represent thousands of police officers all across the state of Nevada.
Thank you. And Jennifer Crow, you're up first on this next question. Who is funding support for this question? How much is being spent? And who is funding opposition and how much is being spent?
Sure. Question one is a big campaign. Obviously, our supporters include more than 3,000 donors to our campaign. More than 1,300 of those donors are right here in Nevada. We have significant support from the business community, the faith community, individuals and corporations all over the state. We've seen donations from gaming interests, you know, folks who are concerned about tourism and public safety, and even national groups. I mean, clearly this is an issue that folks are paying attention to across the country and people are interested in all over the nation. So there's obviously a lot of support and partnership that come from individuals and gun safety groups all over.
Dan Reed.
Noticeably absent from Jennifer's answer was the major donor here, and that's former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who's spending millions and millions on this. And also something that I thought was interesting was, of the donors she listed, she said 1,300 are here in Nevada, but that means over half of them are out-of-state interests that are coming in here to dictate Nevada law. Millions of dollars from Michael Bloomberg. Now, our campaign is funded through our tens of thousands of members that donate to the NRA, and we're here to oppose this because this is bad for Nevada.
I would point out that they don't have any Nevada donors listed on their finance reports. All of their money does come from the NRA in Virginia.
Next question, Dan Reed, you are up first. If I am bird hunting with my friend and his gun malfunctions, and I hand him my gun, did I just break the law?
Well, that's a great question, and it's going to depend on a number of circumstances. So when you're hunting, have you left an area where it's legal to hunt? Do you have all the necessary licenses, et cetera? But there is a hunting exemption, so as long as you're there and it's an area where it's legal to hunt, that's going to fit within this, I would presume.
Bro.
No, you will have not broken the law. Sharing guns when hunting or shooting is one of the exceptions that's outlined in question one. Section 6 of the law really outlines all of the different exceptions, and they're intended to address, you know, common behaviors among gun owners and just the typical or the culture that we have here in Nevada of, you know, passing guns from generation to generation or hunting and recreating on our lands. That's why the exceptions are there, is to specifically not make those kinds of behaviors a crime, but to really go after, bad actors, dangerous people that are avoiding background checks by getting guns in these private sales. That's really what the law is about, and that's how it would be enforced.
Thank you. And Jennifer Crow, first up on this, is there a federal list of mental patients that is used for background checks for gun purchases?
Yes, there is a number of databases that are searched through these FBI background checks, including databases related to mental health. And, when we talk about mental health, these are severely mentally ill folks, people who have been found by the courts to be a danger to themselves or to others, and therefore prohibited from having guns. Right now, in these private sales, none of those databases are being checked. So, closing the loophole would really better enforce some of those prohibitions and make it harder for seriously mentally ill folks to get guns that, again, they're prohibited from having under our current laws.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question. In fact, in 2013, we heard here in Nevada that our courts were having a major issue with reporting our mental health records to our repository. And in 2014, we know that the Department of Public Safety went before the Interim Finance Committee requesting additional funding because our state database was missing 800,000 criminal records. So the proponents, rather than addressing the current system and making sure that that's operating here in the state, have chosen to expand it. And, we hear about the numbers, this many people were stopped on the initial denial of a background check, but what they're not telling you is upwards of 90+% of those are false denials and are later resolved.
Dan Reed, you're up first. The first three words of the Second Amendment are a well-regulated. Isn't that what we are doing with question 1, regulating responsible gun ownership?
Sure. So actually, if you look at the history and you look at the way those terms are used in history, regulated did not mean regulated the way you think of something has many restrictions on it. In fact, it means regular and proper, so you are well prepared. So if you look at the full context, a well-regulated militia did not mean something that had a lot of strict rules and confines on it, and meant that it was well prepared and ready.
Thank you. Jennifer Crow.
We absolutely believe that question 1 is about responsible gun ownership. Nobody wants to give or sell a gun to a felon or a domestic abuser or some other dangerous person who's not supposed to have it. And unfortunately, folks are unwittingly doing that all the time because these sales don't require background checks. We have, many examples of crimes that could have been prevented possibly if background checks had been required in private sales. One case in particular in Las Vegas of a woman who was shot and killed and her children shot and injured by her ex, who was a convicted domestic abuse, or not convicted, but a domestic abuser with a long history, and would have been blocked from getting a gun had he gone to a gun store, but he didn't. He got a gun through a private sale that didn't require a background check, and now 2 children don't have a mom. Now, no one law will solve or stop every crime, but we do know that it will make it harder for criminals to get guns, and that will save some lives, and we think that it's worth it.
Thank you. Jennifer Crow, you are up next on this question. Many sheriffs, we've heard, are against this question, but they are elected officials. How do police chiefs who are appointed stand on it?
Well, as I mentioned, we do have a significant law enforcement support behind question 1. The former Washoe County Sheriff, Mike Haley, former Clark County Sheriff Bill Young, the Clark County District Attorney Steve Wolfson, the Henderson Police Chief Patrick Moores have all come out in support of question 1. We've also earned the endorsement of the Nevada Association of Public Safety Officers, the Las Vegas Fraternal Order of Police, and the Nevada chapter of the Latino Peace Officers Association. Combine those 3 organizations represent 2,300 law enforcement officers all across the state. And they support what we're doing. You might have seen them in our commercials or heard them in the ads on the radio. They support what we're doing and are working hard every day to get this passed because they believe it's enforceable and that it will help reduce gun violence and save some lives, perhaps even their own. You know, police are increasingly feeling a target in just doing their job and keeping us safe, and that's one of the reasons that they support question 1 is that it will keep them safe as well.
Thank you. Dan Reed.
Yeah, you'll notice that those are the unions that are supporting this. Our current elected sheriffs are in opposition across the board other than the one who's remained neutral. Also, the district attorney that was mentioned, we were at a panel a few weeks ago, and he said, we're only going to charge some people, recognizing that, and at least I inferred that innocent people could get caught up in this. And one thing that I didn't get a chance to point out earlier is that if you look at the penalties of this, it's not on the criminal trying to acquire a firearm, it's on the transferor.
And Dan Reed, under current law, what firearm purchases and transfers require a background check and what do not? If question 1 passes, how would this change?
Sure. So under current law, when you go to a dealer, you are required to have a check, whether that dealer is selling online, in their store, at a gun show, or at your kitchen table, right? Private sellers are regulated differently. And so under current law, if you're a prohibited person, it is a felony to acquire a firearm. It's also a crime to give a firearm to a known prohibited person, right? Things that was current law. And so with this, as we know, criminals operate outside the system. And if law enforcement comes across them with a firearm, they can currently charge them. Whereas this is a misdemeanor, 2-year statute of limitations. And like I mentioned, Washington State, after 2 years, is seeing their first prosecution.
Well, I would point out that criminals do go through background checks. As I mentioned, more than 5,300 gun sales in Nevada were blocked to criminals and other dangerous people because of background checks. And as a private seller, a background check is the only way that you have of knowing whether or not you're following our existing law of giving a gun to somebody or selling a gun to somebody who's supposed to have it or not. There's no way to know. You can ask, you can guess, but until you have a background check, there's really no way to know whether or not you're violating our existing laws in who you're selling or giving your gun to. I think that answers that.
Thank you. And then Jennifer Crow, you're up next on this. Our nation is plagued by gun violence, yet the National Rifle Association resists all attempts at improving the situation and offers no alternative solutions. Why?
Well, I can't speak for the NRA, but you know, I would agree that there is an issue with gun violence. I think most Nevadans would agree that. That's why a majority support passing question 1 and what we're doing, because this is not about the Second Amendment or infringing on anybody's rights. This is about enforcing our existing laws and making it harder for dangerous people to get guns. That's really the focus of the legislation or the law, and if you look at it, that's what it does. To Dan's point about Washington State, he's right. This is their first charge related to the law that they have in their state, but the private sale background check system has already blocked 50 sales to dangerous people prohibited from having guns. In Colorado, in the first couple of years of their law, more than 40,000 background checks have been attributed to this new law, stopping nearly 1,000 gun sales to prohibited purchasers. That it's enforceable and it does work.
So this is just making things more illegal, and it's to influence the behavior of law-abiding citizens. If you look at this, it is targeting law-abiding citizens' behavior by saying you need to go to a gun dealer to do this or to do that, because it's already illegal for the criminals. And as I mentioned, the penalties are not on the criminal trying to acquire a firearm. Now, the NRA, we do things that make sense. And in fact, we supported legislation in 2015 here that goes after straw purchasers. 50% of arms trafficking in the United States is through straw purchasers. And those are people who actively defeat the background check system by going in, buying a gun, and knowing to give it to someone else. Those are people that are doing this now. And so we help pass some of that legislation. We've also worked on things like the NICS Improvement Act, which goes to improve our databases and reporting.
And Dan Reed, you're first on this next question. What, if any, fiscal impact would this proposal have on state and local finances?
Well, that's a great question. So up in Oregon, let me just tell you about this. There was a pastor up there who wanted to make a statement. He won a rifle in this raffle, and Oregon has a very similar law to what's being proposed here. And he was going to destroy that rifle or turn it into some artwork, and he shared his story with the Washington Post. And one of the questions that came up was, well, where's the gun now? He said, oh, well, I'm storing it with someone in my congregation till I decide what to do with it. So a violation, it was pointed out. Law enforcement up there spent 5 weeks investigating this illegal transfer. Ultimately, they just said they couldn't bring charges because they didn't know where the gun went and the pastor wouldn't talk. That's what this law is going to be. And we know that just last week, Clark County was in the legislature getting a tax increase for more cops because they don't have enough resources right now. Are we going to spend 5 weeks investigating a guy who just passed a background check, who's doing the seemingly responsible thing, who maybe wasn't familiar with firearms, and storing it with someone who was? That's what this does.
Thank you. Jennifer Crow.
In regards to the pastor in Oregon, from what we hear from law enforcement is that they have priorities and they prioritize their calls. I seriously doubt they spent a constant 5 weeks investigating this crime. I'm guessing that they had other crimes that maybe took priority, and that's why it was 5 weeks. But fundamentally, the law worked the way it was supposed to. It was investigated, and it was determined there was no, malintent, and the pastor could go on his way. I think that proves the point that somebody not intent on doing harm was not prosecuted, but somebody who knowingly, in this other case, is being prosecuted. That shows that it makes sense. In regards to the actual question, what was it again? I apologize.
It has been a long evening. What, if any, fiscal impact would this proposal have on state and local finances?
None. There would be no fiscal impact. There's no cost to Nevada taxpayers or impact on local or state budgets.
Thank you. And this is the last question, and then we'll go to closing. Jennifer Crow, you're up first. Will question 1 put an undue burden on people purchasing firearms?
No, it won't. When you buy a gun from a licensed gun dealer, you go through a background check. Now, if you're going to sell a gun to a private party, you do the same thing. You meet at a licensed gun dealer. In a few minutes, you conduct a background check. You can move on with your sale and go about your day. There's nothing inconvenience about this or difficult. As I mentioned, the voluntary system that Dan likes to refer to is neither easy nor efficient to use.
Thank you. Dan Reed.
This will absolutely impact law-abiding citizens. You're now going to have to pay a fee to loan a firearm to your best friend. And then you're going to have to pay another fee to get that firearm back. That's one trip down and then back, assuming that it went through immediately. But going back to the Oregon pastor, ultimately he wasn't charged, but he had to hire an attorney, and his life was interrupted for 5 weeks. Now, can you imagine that the case? Because you loaned your firearm to your friend, and he told you he was going to the range, and you said, oh, that might fit within here. But he went to BLM land, and that's not an exception. And now all of a sudden, you're the one that's getting in trouble, not him. Or let's say you loaned him a firearm under the hunting exception, and he maybe took a buck that was out of zone, and so now he doesn't possess a necessary license. He doesn't get in trouble for it. You do. So this is going to inconvenience law-abiding citizens. Again, the laws are already on the books to go after the criminals.
Okay, thank you both. Now for 1-minute closing statements. Dan Reed, you're first.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for sitting through this. This is obviously a really important issue. And remember, this is a take it or leave it. Even if you support background checks, if you found one thing wrong with this, you need to vote no, because we can't change this. If this passes, this is the law of the land for 3 years. Stand with law enforcement. Stand with the 16 out of 17 sheriffs. Stand with our attorney general, and stand with our governor. This is bad for Nevada. This is a bad, poorly written law. It's not going to make Nevada safer, and it's only going to burden law-abiding citizens. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Jennifer Crow.
Thank you again for the opportunity to be here tonight and answer some really great questions about question 1. There's a lot to vote on Election Day, and no matter how you feel about whatever's going on at the top of the ticket, I really urge you to vote all the way down and vote yes on question 1. It's very important. It's my sincere hope that we've been able to lay out some of the facts tonight so that it's clear precisely what question 1 will and won't do, and I'd just like to go over it one more time. Question 1 will make it harder for criminals to get guns. It will respect the rights of law-abiding gun owners like you and I, and at the same time, put another hurdle in front of a criminal trying to get a gun. Question 1 will give law enforcement another tool to enforce our existing laws. No one law can prevent every crime or stop every tragedy, but we do know that closing the loophole will help reduce gun violence and that will save lives. I really urge you to learn more. Visit our website, safenevada.org, or talk to me after this presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and thanks again for the opportunity tonight.
Thank you both. To thank all the volunteers from the League of Women Voters, Sierra Nevada Forum, PFLAG, AAUW, and also the folks at the Brewery Arts Center for providing support to us and for streaming this live and archiving it on their site, and for covering it and giving us publicity. And the audience for wonderful, wonderful questions. Thank you. Early voting starts this Saturday.